Nick,
Hello.
I was just going to say,
Yep.
you can feel free to go ahead and get started as soon as you are ready.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Let's see. Are you seeing my presentation
Yes.
full screen?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. All right. So we have been talking a lot about encapsulated soil lifts today, and I want to go through sort of a step-by-step how to install. This isn't um, permitting. This isn't designing or anything like that. This is basically just um, boots on the ground. How do you put these things together? So we'll just get kicked off. Oh, a caveat. Um, these are the BioD block version of encapsulated soil lifts. So this is a little different than what Patrick had shown earlier. Um, this is the modular version that I had demonstrated in my talk earlier. So um, this is just a quick example of some encapsulated soil lifts that we installed in partnership with Lakes and Ponds and the town of Hubbardton on Black Pond. I believe we did this in 2019, maybe 2018, can't remember. And so you can see that this is a very long stretch of eroding road that is tightly penned between Black Pond and cliffs on the other side. You can see the steep hill rising from the other side of this ditch here. And it was really fun because down into the pond here, there's a equally steep slope. So it got really, really deep really fast. Which was a challenge for installing these because you kind of need a shelf to be able to place your bottom course on, to place your stone toe on. And so that leads us to the steps of installing these, which is if you need to be doing soil maneuvering in and around water, you need a turbidity curtain. So installing that turbidity curtain, which I'll show a little bit of later, excavating that shelf to build your stone toe on, which is that raising up out of the water slash protection practice for the end of your slope. Um, Laying down the geotextile and filling it with a stone toe, uh, adding your lifts and your plants, which is done simultaneously, although I have it as separate steps later in the presentation. Um, and then also following up with care and protection and education around those encapsulated soil lifts is also very important because community rejection of a project is like your body rejecting a transplanted organ. It can making sure that you're doing the putting to sorry making sure that you're doing the groundwork to make sure that it's not rejected is very important for the survival of the project. So deploying your turbidity curtain is always step one, to make sure that you're localizing any impacts from your project installation, and you're not damaging more of that sensitive littoral zone in the lake than needed to make sure the project gets done. So you can see this turbidity curtain right here. This is one of the ones that we have at Northwoods. This one was actually brand new. I don't even know if we had deployed it at all before this project. So it's several sections of foam float with a vinyl curtain attached. This one's a vinyl curtain. Some of our other sections that we have now, from on the one that we borrowed from the town of Wilmington, has more of a I can't really think of how to describe it, but it's a black curtain that is not vinyl. At the bottom of that curtain, there's a chain that runs along the length of the bottom of the curtain section, which is supposed to hold the bottom of the curtain down to the floor of the lake. But it doesn't always have much heft to it. So we often will put stones just in regular intervals along the bottom of that curtain. And then we remove the whole thing when we're done. It's supposed to be localized. It's pretty close to shore, so 3 to 5 foot offshore if possible. Sometimes you need more working space, so it can be a little bit flexible. But what we do is we try to pin it in place with these stakes so that wind and wave action, as well as the work that we're doing onshore, doesn't move our curtain too much. On the Black Pond project, which you can see over here, it would have been impossible to put those stakes in. So mostly we just did the stone emplacement method. And it stayed where it was supposed to stay very well. And you can see that it's keeping all of the water that is closest to shore uh, pinned in towards shore. I have a good example of this here that you can see where we're keeping all of the stone dust from the stone toe and excavation work that we're doing close to shore here. This is Lake Bombazine, the Cedar Mountain Road project that Laura showed earlier, I believe. And you can see that out here in the lake, the water is clear as can be. So these curtains really do work, and it's really important to put them in place so that all of this stone dust and crud isn't going out into the wider lake. The next step is to excavate that shelf. This is back on Black Pond here, where we ended up having to go back towards the road about, I think, 6 feet or so. There wasn't much space to work with, and we definitely couldn't go out into the lake because of how, or the pond, because of how deep it got so quickly. So we had to scoop back, and then this is the geotextile that we would lay out for the stone toe. We always like to work with excavator operators on these projects because of how much material needs to be moved. If we had tried to do this with hand tools, we might still be there today. So it's really important to have a good excavator operator on site to be able to move that material. And it is also really nice to have a trucking availability so that you can move material off site. In this site, there's absolutely nowhere to put that material. So luckily the town road crew was able to take it away and put it to use elsewhere. This is Anna lovingly placing every stone on our stone toe back at Black Pond. So you can see the front of the toe here is what we construct first. We do that because back here in the back side of the stone toe, it doesn't really super matter the shape of your shelf. It's nice that it's generally flat, but it doesn't need to be. But up here, it's really nice to have sort of a sloping up angle so that any ice push that does happen is directed over top of your practice rather than into or up the nose of your practice. You're making with these encapsulated soil lifts what I call a stack of tacos. And this is the first taco here. So your shell is starting down here and then going out and up around your stone toe, leaving a bit of the beef and beans out here, squishing towards the lake, acting as protection. Then you fill in the back of this stone toe and sort of mush it down so it's relatively flat, but definitely don't get caught up in the details on that back side. And like Patrick had said, you want to be able to have your encapsulated soil lift lean a little bit back into the hill rather than being sort of ready to slide out. Not that it would slide out, but you want gravity on your side with these practices as much as possible. So you can see Connor here lovingly placing the stones on the front of the stone toe, and then Alice over here folding the blanket back over that stone toe to create that geotextile stone taco that we love so much. The hardest part of lifts to describe really is these coir materials that Mike was just talking about in the other room there. So to make these lifts, you have these Bio-D blocks that are around straw erosion control blanket, which is around soil. And so rather than try to paint you a word picture here of these Bio-D blocks, I'm just going to show you a series of photos and talk about them a bit. This product is, it goes one way, it's unidirectional. So you can see here that we've got an outie end on this side and an innie end on this side. And that'll become a little bit clearer in some future pictures that I have. But this is the coir log. It's sort of a flattened rectangular, it looks like if you've ever had Spam musubi, it's kind of like the Spam. It's sort of a long, flattish coconut log. And then it comes with a coconut blanket attached to it. And I'm sure Mike could whip out some descriptors to quantify the weave of this blanket, but I don't have that information. You can see here that the blanket comes attached and tied with these little bits of rope, and then the blanket will flop out in 2 directions. Each of these blanket attached pieces are about 4 feet from log to tassely end out here. And here's a coir log right here in the middle with the blankets partially flapped out on either side and then fully flapped out here on this one. And this is a better picture of getting a look at the outie end and the innie end. So you can see that this is a modular practice. So this log will attach to this log by having the innie end or the outie end go onto this little extended blanket piece of the innie end of this log. And you tie them together. Here's that weave that I was talking about. I don't know the numbers behind it, but you can fit fingers through each of the holes. Okay, so this is that log piece, that flat log piece on the front there. These curve around real well. They're very flexible, and you can get some good organic curving on the corners of this. And you can see here, like Patrick talked about earlier, we can key in the end pretty far in from the water with this big stone here. So here is our team. This is Gabby and Julia. They're laying out the coir log and untying the blanket and tying the one log to the next. And we also tend to tie the upper sections of blanket together so that when we stake it back later, it's all going to act as one piece rather than having any rogue blanket pieces flapping about anywhere else. And you can see that this is going directly onto our stone toe here. Underneath each of these blanket sections or these block sections, we're also adding potted plants underneath there. You can kind of see them poking their little heads out up here. And so I'm gonna go back one. After this step, we lay out the erosion control blanket inside of this sort of cradle area here, and then tuck the potted plants roots underneath the block. I think I have another photo later that shows that a little bit. So we lay out our products like this, and then flap the erosion control blanket and the top flap of the Bio-D block blanket out toward the lake. And it looks kind of like this when we're filling it with soil. So it's because this is a flattened log, it's important to keep it vertical or even a little bit back leaning in towards shore while you're backfilling here with soil. Also, this picture I think highlights the importance of having someone who is gentle on the levers in your excavator here. We're wearing hard hats because we love our brains, but also we want to have somebody in the cab who's really precise and good at what they're doing. And thankfully, so far, 100% have been really, really thankful for every excavator operator that we've worked with. So we have a team here holding the log vertical. You see we have grubbing tools in our hands here. And once the soil is backfilled into this cradle section here, we'll take our hazel hose and we'll spread that soil out and sort of try to tamp it a little bit close to the edge. We have the excavator operator take their bucket and press down on that soil after it's been put into the cradle to just press out any air pockets so that we don't have slumping later. We want to have some structural integrity to the practice. And if we have big voids, the first amount of pressure on it could cause it to slump and fail. You can see over here, Dusty and Ben raking out the tops of our lifts because we want them to be relatively even so that when we staple this erosion control blanket back onto the practice, it has good soil contact and gets that flatness that doesn't allow real erosion or any kind of erosion underneath the blanket because it's in contact fully with the soil. This practice is also really nice for and flexible so that you can work around existing vegetation like this willow tree here. So once we're backfilled, pressed, and everything like that, and we have our plants under here, as you can see, we'll seed the top of that soil, and we like to use native wildflower mix because it creates this beautiful meadow that Holly was talking about earlier on top of our practice and acts as sort of a temporary placeholder for the vegetation that we're hoping will come in and actually will also hopefully persist. Some of the more beautiful native perennials that we love will persist on this practice to continue to beautify and hold together those soils. The hope for this is that we're creating an environment that makes it so the plants we put in are happy to spread their roots into this practice and create really robust root systems to hold the soil together to prevent future erosion. So once we've flopped that erosion control blanket over the soil and we've flopped this coir blanket over the soil, we will start staking back. And the way we stake is to sort of aim our stakes back toward ourselves and then lever them backwards so that we add a little extra tension on that front to prevent that flopping forward because we want that back lean. We want to work with gravity here. And then we stake those in. So you can see here we've got the soil backfilled here. We've got the blanket that's flopped lakewards, and then we flop those two blanket layers back toward the land and then stake them back. This is a good visual of that. And of course, the whole time our turbidity curtain is at work out there. So to talk a little bit about the plants we put in, we add these plants between the layers of the encapsulated soil lifts. And ideally, they have a little bit of a verticalness to them, but in some cases, they just don't. But we do have roots and soil back behind this log, working hard to keep these plants alive. And we tend to use plants that don't mind being in this configuration. So we like to use plants that love rooting themselves, like willows and viburnums. We use a lot of dogwood. We've used arrowwood and all sorts of plants like that that are great in this situation and are native to our area. We also plant into the tops of the top course of encapsulated soil lifts. And we also seed onto the outer edges of these lower courses and throughout the upper course. And those tend to pop up through the top blankets with no problem at all. So here's another example of plants between the lifts. And then this one, you can kind of see, it's a little bit harder to see, but you can kind of see that we've planted into the top of this lift here on Black Pond. You definitely saw this photo earlier in, I believe in Laura's presentation. This is Cedar Mountain Road on Lake Bomazene. Here's the condition that it had been in. Here's the encapsulated soil lifts being added. And then here's 3 years later. You can see a lot of the perennial seed, flower seeds that we threw down are growing really well, beautifying this area and really holding that soil together going forward. I am not seeing in this photo, but when I visited in 2020, we definitely saw a lot of the woody plants that we had put in were doing pretty well. Here's another example of a project. I think this is 2 years after installation on Maidstone. The bottom 2 or 3 lifts here are left to wild out. We put in live stakes behind our log, which in a few cases worked pretty well. And then the upper course is actually just being gardened by the landowners. So you can see there's some lupin here and they put a few little mushrooms and sculptures and stuff in there. But it's starting to take on the look of a more natural shoreline than what had been here, which was a cedar retaining wall. So the next step is just repeat. You stake back and then you stack the next layer on top of your previous layer. You're staking it pretty tightly back landward. You're tucking in blanket ends. You're keying in the ends of your bio-D blocks you can see here, and then staggering back upland. So you can get a 1-to-1 slope. You probably want more. I believe here we were going for a 2-to-1 slope. So this is 2 foot back, 1 foot up, and then back and back and back to the rest of the beach here on Crystal Lake in this project. The care and maintenance and education can't be discounted, so these need to be watered. We generally raise them up out of the water so that our bottom lift isn't constantly soaking wet, especially on lakes. And you can incorporate a no-mow zone into this so that folks aren't trying to mow on top of your lift, which would be devastating to me if we've planted in a bunch of shrubs. You need to watch out for invasives, because if Japanese knotweed starts taking over one of your projects like this, it'll outcompete all of the lovely natives that you've planted and also not contribute to any bank integrity, which is hopefully the goal of the project that you've installed. Exclude foot traffic, especially for the first few years. These look like they could be steps or a bench, and they are not. It actually can be pretty detrimental to your project if folks are constantly climbing up these. It can create low points in your project, which can become weak points in terms of water flow and erosion. And then it's also really important to include signage, and that's part of that anti-rejection piece of these projects that you're looking for with communities, trying to make sure that there's pretty informative, engaging, simple to read signs for people to understand what the goals are of the project and understand that this is for water quality in the lakes that we all love. All right, that's all I got. Any questions?
Great. Well, I don't see any questions. Thank you so much, Meg. I think the next thing that we have on our agenda is a break. But if everybody wants to leave this room, you can go back to the main room, and then just be back at 2:45 for the final part of the training. Thanks.
All right, thank you.